I'm Rakesh Rootsman Rak. Welcome to another edition of Practicing Transition. And in this session, what we're going to look at, a consideration for how to create inclusive public events. So the first question is, well, why is this important? And I'm sure you know the answers already, so I'll go through this quickly. But what we know, Transition Town is a movement that is looking to see how we can transition our communities away from being fossil fuel dependent. And as I say, the key thing to do this is to do it with communities. So we need to work with everyone within our community and not just certain people. What we see, especially here in Europe, is quite often many of the transition towns struggle to actually get a really diverse group of people to be part of, especially the decision making processes within transition towns. So their voice quite often isn't heard. What we see is many teams are quite often white, middle class, and perhaps even more elderly. And while this is great that these people have the time, the energy and the passion to make this work happen, so that's fantastic, the challenge really is quite often they attract, because of their mentality, their way of doing things that are culturally appropriate for them, they attract people who are like them, and they don't necessarily see some of the things that they are doing actually inhibit other people from different communities who are not like them from actually attending. Quite often we see people say, yeah, but we opened it up, we said everyone is welcome to come. But that's not always the case, that people just don't turn up and they don't understand why. So quite often that makes them feel a little bit disappointed. Maybe they feel that, why is it these people don't care, or why is it they're not helping us out? So we're going to look at some of the reasons as to why that might be. The first thing that I do if I'm working in a particular area is I first of all try to understand, well, who is the community? Who is actually, wherever it is I'm living? Who are the people who are really visible? Who are the people who are not so visible? How can I find them? Where can I actually meet these people? So I'll actually start thinking about, where some of these people might be gathering. It could be specialist events, specialist clubs and social centres. It could be places of worship. I also find different organisations who might be already working with them, who people are attracted to already because that's their specialist area. Whoever it is I speak to, I try to find, whatever group it is, I try to find some kind of a natural leader in their community. And I'll start by talking to them to really start to see, well, what are some of the challenges that the people who work, who they're looking after, who they're attracting, actually may have, so I can get a better picture, a better understanding of the types of things that I might do. But more importantly, or as importantly, what I also do is I find out, well, what are some of their needs? So as an organisation, as a group, as a social centre, what is it that they're struggling with? And is it something that I, or through the transition group, can actually do for them? So we're working out different ways in which we can actually help each other. And and as I say, at the same time we're really finding out what some of the obstacles are, so when we actually plan and design things that we're going to do together, we can look at how it is we can mitigate and really open the space for the people who for their group to actually attend. The next area that we can look at is the actual space, the actual venue that we're going to use. So depending on who we're trying to attract, or who is coming, have we made this place really truly accessible for them? For example, are there accessible toilets? Are there step-free access? Are there lifts and ramps so that people can navigate the space? Perhaps maybe do we need things like hearing loops, and other things that really help people to actually be there. And as I say, through conversations with people who are working with these people, who know these people well enough, these things will become obvious. Another area that is quite common, or is becoming more and more common today in these days, is where people have sensory overloads. So can we set up the space in such a way that noise is kind of concentrated in certain areas and isn't just bounced around everywhere, so that it creates this, as I say, sensory overload? Another area, very important, is to understand if the space we're utilising is culturally acceptable or not. Quite often, this is something I see very, very often, where people arrange events in places that are really culturally not acceptable, and are actual barriers for people attending. So some places, for example, could be places like where alcohol is served, and like pubs, and another area that, depending on who you're working with, you may want to avoid using places of worship. Having said that, if the group that you're working with is a particular faith group, then obviously that makes sense. But if you want to open it up to bring anyone into that space, then perhaps places of worship might not be the ideal place. The next area we can look at is when do we actually put these events on? So are there certain holidays or celebrations that on the date that we're trying to make this event happen, and could this be a help or a hindrance to our event? Again, it could be either, but just to ask yourself that question. What about the time of day? Is it a time of day if we're trying to attract parents? Is it a time of day where they have to get children to bed, or they're taking them to school, or whatever? Are we looking to attract people who are perhaps office workers and working, typical 9 to 5 type office hours? So what time of day do we put this on? The next thing we can actually look at is the actual event itself. What are some of the things that we might need on the day that could really help make people feel welcomed, and and really allow them to really fit in and really be part of it without feeling like they are, they're a hindrance to you. So, for example, people, do we need language interpreters? Do we need sign language interpreters? What are the other things that we can do to really make people feel, no, we've thought about you, we've welcomed you in. You're absolutely welcome. So, yeah, the welcoming is another huge part of it. What are the things you can do to really set up the space to really make people feel, yeah, this is lovely. This is really lovely, warm, welcoming space. One thing that we quite often do is we actually even name the people, the different types of people who might be in the room. And the reason for this is, to actually say that yes, we have actually thought of you. So we can go through a whole list and say, yeah, I don't know, the young people who are here, you are welcome. The older people who are here with all your wisdom, you are welcome. People who are, maybe you can go through a whole range of different neurodivergences. Maybe you can go through the different LGBTQ, and gender. We can look at, perhaps you've got some very, very artistic people in your room. Perhaps you've got very practical people. Perhaps you've got very intellectual people, There's a whole range of different people who you might find coming to your event. But the invitation here is to really think about them and to actually name them and actually say, you are welcome. What else is it we can do to actually create a culture of inclusivity? To actually, what are some of the other things we can do to really make people feel welcomed? Another couple of things, we can also look at, the people who are doing the speaking, who are actually facilitating the event you're putting on. Are they a diversity? Do you have a diversity of people actually in your, who are actually leading the sessions? And are they representative of the audience. So quite often we may find a typical white male elderly person delivering something to people who are not from that group, and so it sets a kind of many people feel, well, this isn't my group, this isn't my community. So quite often the very first person who you have speaking, it's really great if you can actually make sure that that person really is representative of the groups that you are trying to attract and trying to engage with. The last couple of things we can look at are, if you're catering, then have we thought about all the different allergies, the gluten-frees and the nut allergies, etc. Is the food, culturally acceptable? Is it sattvic? Is it halal? Is it kosher? And different lifestyles, vegan, vegetarian, etc. And so quite often what might be really useful is to keep things simple, is really to narrow it down to, something that is most likely to be able to be okay for everyone. So vegan, which is environmentally friendly, organic, perhaps gluten-free, etc., etc. So to really think about your catering to make it accessible to everyone. And the last thing we'll look at is the financial. If there's some kind of entrance fee, can you make it in such a way that regardless of your financial background, there is a fee that you can pay that is actually okay for you? So those who can pay more, they pay more. Those who are not in such a good financial position can still come, but having paid less. Also, are there some perhaps travel barriers? Could you somehow get some funding or set up some kind of way in which you can help people to actually arrive at your events? There's a whole bunch of more things that we could probably talk about, but I think that's a good start. And one of the things that we've been doing in the Permaculture Association and Transition Towns is really deeply looking at this. So you can find different reports which I'll share with you, which help you to really think some of these issues through. And that's something that we will share with you. So I hope that's useful. Thank you very much. Enjoy.